Have you ever felt that there is a latent force? Fast-paced world we live in, it's easy to get lost in the maelstrom of daily responsibilities and worries, forgetting the incredible power that lies within. But what if I told you that this power is there, waiting to be discovered and used to transform your life in extraordinary ways? Imagine a world where your dreams become reality, where your most ambitious goals are achieved with ease, and where you experience a sense of inner peace and fulfillment that transcends any obstacle. This world is closer than you think, and the key to unlock it lies in ancient knowledge that has been passed down through generations. I invite you to explore the depths of your mind and unleash the hidden power that lies within you. You will learn proven techniques and powerful strategies that will allow you to manifest your most fervent desires and overcome any challenges that stand in your way of success and happiness. It's not just about positive thinking, but about understanding the true workings of the mind and how you can use its unlimited power to create the life you've always wanted. Get ready to embark on a journey of personal transformation. And the sun. The sun emits towards us rays of heat and light, without which this old world could never exist. Glory be to the heat and light, which are power and wisdom poured out upon us. But there is also a third kind of ray emitted by the old sun, whose mission we cannot so easily bless. The sun's actinic rays are deadly. They cause disintegration, decomposition. There are persons who assert that there was a time when a great vaporous dome hovered over the earth and revolved with it, as do now the vaporous domes of Jupiter, and that this vaporous dome kept out almost entirely the actinic rays, while it admitted the rays of light and heat. Thus they explain the great ages of Adam and Methuselah, and they say that unless this vaporous dome is again formed around our earth to repel these deadly rays, we shall never attain immortality in the flesh. They claim that just as the heat and light rays are power and wisdom, so the actinic rays are the devil of the Bible, the destroyer. And they believe that before man can be saved, the destroyer must be cast into the outer darkness, shut out by that protective vapor dome. An interesting and seemingly plausible theory, isn't it? But there are facts yet to be considered. It is true that if a great watery veil were spread over the earth today, there could be no more death. But there could be no growth either. Every form of life would continue as it is, wrinkles, grey hair and all. Why? Because there must be dissolution of old forms before new ones can be created from that material. Take a photographic plate as an example. Here is a glass surface covered with a delicate jelly. Expose it in a dark room under a red light and you can see how it looks. Keep it there as long as you wish, and it will still look the same. Now put it in the dark room and go out and seek pleasure. The delicate film is undisturbed, but you come to a beautiful forest that you want to capture. You focus on it, and a small click lasting a second transforms the surface. Just for an instant of time you let in those actinic rays, and then everything goes back to darkness inside the camera. Now you go back into the dark room and turn on the red light, with which you see your beautiful forest again, reproduced on that delicate jelly surface. If you were to let in a little daylight, your image would disappear in an instant. The delicate jelly would decompose in an attempt to reproduce what it faced. But you don't let in daylight. You fix your piece of beautiful forest by dipping the plate in a solution that hardens the gelatin particles to glass. From now on, light cannot affect that jelly. You have the image, but the life, the progress, the change, the possibilities are gone from the delicate jelly forever. But if you could live forever under a red light, you would not need to fix your negative. It would retain that image forever. And if you continued to live under the red light, you could throw away your camera and plates. You could never take another picture. And you wouldn't need such entertainment either, at least not for long. A few days in the red light and you'd be sick, and a few more days and you'd go crazy. Eventually, nature would fix you, and there would be no more change. I wonder if scientists have ever tried to keep a dead body hermetically sealed under red glass. Cutting off the actinic rays should stop decay and facial change. You see, actinic rays, the devil rays or sun destroyers, are absolutely essential to all change in the photographic plate. Probably the actinic rays soften and separate the gelatin atoms, which immediately polarize into the shape of the scene, facing the light and heat rays. Without the softening action of the actinic rays, the gelatin could not take the shape of the scene it faces. And without the light and heat rays, it could not see and feel the scene, even if the actinic rays were present. All three types of rays, light, heat, and actinic, are needed to produce a photographic negative. It is said that all inventions are but clumsy copies of mechanisms found in the human body and brain, that man contains on a microscopic scale all the inventions ever thought of, or ever will be thought of. This is another way of saying that man is the microcosm, and the universe the macrocosm. Victor Hugo expresses the same truth when he says, "Man is an infinitely small copy of God." The whole process of photography occurs in the body and the brain. There is not a thought or vision that is not photographed in some tiny cell. There is not a cell that cannot be cleansed of that impression, resensitized, and given another impression. Perhaps cells are immortal, as science claims. If so, every cell must have gone through this process of cleansing, resensitizing, and rephotographing countless billions of times, with countless possibilities ahead. And in each of these photographed and rephotographed, actinic rays are absolutely indispensable. So I cannot believe that the immortality of anything other than a marble statue depends on the cutting of actinic rays from the sun. It is true that actinic rays cause dissolution, but dissolution simply precedes resolution. Dissolution gives light and heat, wisdom and power of love, the opportunity to produce still higher forms. Blessed be the destroying rays, blessed be the devil of nature, for he alone clears the way for God himself, and cleans and rearranges the debris after God has passed. But when the race was in its infancy, it looked at the work done by these actinic rays, and fear was born. It saw things die, it saw destruction in the path of the wind, and like any child, it imagined evil things. He personified the destructive power as Diablos, the devil, which means destroyer. He also saw the principle of construction and growth in nature, and imagined a builder. But being a child, he would come to the childish conclusion that the destroyer and the builder were eternally working against each other, that they were enemies. You see, this was before the race conceived the idea that two could work together. It was every wild man for himself and the devil take the last. So the infant race began to love the builder, God, and to despise and fear the destroyer, and in its ignorance it personified both. But here and there arose a clear visionary who glimpsed the truth. God spoke through Isaiah saying, "Behold, I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things." Solomon said that the Lord creates evil for the day of evil. And every visionary in every Bible has tried to make clear the unity, wisdom, power, and presence of God. All life is one. The Son is God manifest. The destroyer belongs to the Trinity and can no more be dispensed with than the other two members. Wisdom and the power of love. And you can be sure that the destroyer only touches what needs to be dissolved in order to be transmuted. Has something gone out of your life? Have you lost something you held dear? Do not grieve. It has been destroyed or taken away to make room for even higher things. God gives and God takes away in response to your highest desires. The destroyer does but clear the plate for a more beautiful image. Be still and know that all things are working for the manifestation of your deepest desires. Work with things, not against them. Chapter 2. Triplicity of Being. Man is a three-layered being rather than a two-layered one, as theorized by Thomson J. Hudson. The obvious stratum is commonly called the conscious or objective mind. This is the surface mind, the everyday mind, the mind we use in our waking hours. Then there is the subconscious mind. The subconscious or subjective mind is the layer of the mind that receives the knowledge and wisdom that has passed through the conscious mind. The subconscious stratum of the mind houses the habits and instincts formed at some time and place in and by the conscious mind. Sub means under. The subconscious mind lies beneath the conscious mind, as the depths of the lake lie beneath the surface. But there is a third layer of mind that lies within and beyond the conscious and subconscious mind, and whose functioning Hudson confuses with that of the subconscious mind. This might be called, for lack of a better name, the superconscious mind, the mind above the conscious mind, the mind above consciousness. This superconscious mind is what we call God, from whom all wisdom comes. The conscious mind is the point of contact between what we have already learned in this and previous states of existence and the limitless reservoir of truth yet to be learned. The conscious mind is like the surface of a lake. The subconscious mind is like the depths of the lake, every drop of which has at some time been on the surface and at any moment may be recalled there. But the superconscious mind is like the rains of heaven and the streams of the snow-covered heights, from which the lake is perpetually replenished. What we already know, what we do by instinct, rests in the subconscious mind, always ready to be remembered by the conscious mind. The conscious mind has to do with what we are learning now. The superconscious mind contains all wisdom, knowledge, and power. In it we live, move, and have our being, and from it we are able to call forth, by aspiration and inspiration, all that we wish to know. The visible universe as it is the subconscious and conscious mind of God. It represents what has been thought out of the universal reservoir of truth, but it is only a foretaste of the wonderful provisions that still await our aspiration and inspiration. Think of all the wonderful discoveries and inventions of the last 60 years, all thought out of that great universal reservoir, and eye has not seen nor ear heard of the glories that still await us in the great superconscious realm. Mrs. Bohm illustrates individuality and solidarity with a star-shaped diagram. Each point of the star represents a person, a formed character. In other words, it represents the subconscious or habitual self, the nature of the person. The center of the star represents God, the universal mind, with which each person is one on the invisible side. Looking at the points alone, there is diversity, separation. But looking from the center outward toward the points, we see that points and center are one with no dividing lines. Now imagine a line cutting each point from the center, an imaginary line, not a real one, and you will have a fair illustration of the conscious mind. The conscious mind lies between the personality and the universality of each of us, between the human and the divine in each of us, between what has been realized and that limitless reservoir of beauties waiting to be realized. Look at the star from the center, and you will see that each point is simply a little bay projecting outward from the center, so that each individuality is an inlet of God, each individual mind, an inlet of the divine mind. And the conscious mind is the imaginary line where the personal mind and the divine mind meet. You can easily see that one's conscious mind then would be filled with personality or divinity, according as he looks downward and is occupied with the physical self, or looks upward and aspires toward the universal part of himself, the God part. Now imagine the center of the star as something fluid, always living and always free, and think of the points as something almost solid, partially fixed. Imagine the points as containing water of life so muddied with false beliefs that it continually deposits along its edges layers of mud, which harden more and more, with the water becoming thicker and the beaches ever widening. Thus you will perceive the difference between personality and universality. Now imagine the conscious mind endowed with will. Notice that as it moves toward the star point, toward the material part of itself, it becomes tense with anxiety and thus closes the point from the center, preventing a free play of the life currents through the star point, the personality. So the personality dries up, literally. This is the process by which we age. Then imagine the conscious mind turned in faith and love toward the center of life. Think, with this broader vision and knowledge of life, how lightly it would hold the things of the personality, of that little point of personality, knowing that the personality is only a small entrance of divinity, and that the wide opening between the two is always open, that the personality exists as a result of ever-changing currents of divinity, and that only its own clinging and striving can hinder the currents. Knowing all this, the conscious mind turns away from the already realized personality and opens wide the entrance into the great center of all life. So the conscious mind looks upward, not downward, and enters into its realm of love, wisdom, power. This is inspiration and aspiration. Yes, you can receive whatever you desire, provided you invoke the superconscious mind, the one mind above all. Whatever you can ask of this mind, believing that you receive, you shall have. When you cannot ask in faith, it is usually because you have not meditated enough with the thought of God, the divine being of all creation. When we meditate too much on the thought of personality, things, materiality, then God seems weak and distant and powerless, and we cannot believe that we will receive what we ask for. We need daily periods to withdraw from physical life and meditate on the thought of our oneness with omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, and our oneness with each other. Thus faith grows, aspiration and inspiration become our habit of mind, and the waters of life flow freely through us. The one Spirit will guide you in all the affairs of life, and you are only safe when you follow its promptings. If you want to know the guidance of Spirit, measure your impulses by the golden rule, for Spirit is love for all. Chapter 3. Soul, Mind and Body. If there is an individual soul that leaves the body at death, as most of us suppose, then this individual soul must be an organization of cellular souls, just as the body is an organization of cells. The body is referred to as the shell, the house in which we live, the temple. When leaving the body, then, only the grosser elements are shed and left as dead, while the soul of each cell ascends, still organized in the individual soul, and the cells of the body disintegrate because the soul no longer holds them together. This agrees with the claim of Theosophy that there is an astral body within the material body, which is like the material body but more beautiful. Many people claim to have seen this astral body leave their temple. Perhaps Paul was referring to this when he spoke of two bodies. It seems reasonable to suppose that this spiritual body carries within it all the knowledge acquired in this state of existence, and that in a new incarnation, previous experiences are forgotten, just as 1,000 things are forgotten every day of our lives, things that at some future time we may remember. The thing was there in our subconscious all the time. It just didn't affect us enough to make us think about it. A child's interest in this incarnation keeps his memories of past lives deep in the subconscious. If he wanted it badly enough and thought about it long enough, he could recall incidents in past lives, just as he can recall an incident from yesterday or last year that he has temporarily forgotten. Many people claim to have remembered past states of existence by desire and concentration, and many claim to have flashes of recollection without any special desire or intention. And the Society for Psychical Research has on record many strange cases of dual or multifaceted personality, etc., which seem to confirm this conception of soul and body. It seems to me that the soul is the naked life force which is one with the spirit, that material experiences are the matrices by which the life force or soul force is formed and organized into individuality, and that we discard the material parts of the body as fast as we can, just as in the lower forms of life the shells are discarded when the vertebrae appear, the shell protecting and molding the life form until it is sufficiently formed and organized to dispense with the shell. When the physical body becomes too rigid and inflexible for the growing mind or soul, then it is discarded, and it seems as if the soul, through growth and attraction, steps into a new incarnation where the available material provides a better matrix. As long as the body is alive and flexible, responding readily to the developing organization of the individual, the soul continues to change in its matrix, its body, day by day as needed. But a stiff and too rigid matrix or body must be discarded altogether for a new one. From the soul, the body takes form, and when the body becomes inadequate to express the growth of the soul, it is discarded altogether. The body, astral and material, is the storage of past experiences and the wisdom organized through those experiences. The objective mind in the brain is the surface of this storage, the door through which all this wisdom and knowledge entered the individual organization. The brain is the telephone exchange through which we can use this store of wisdom and knowledge at will. The objective mind governs and directs not only the telephone exchange, but also all the sub-storages with which it is connected. The objective mind also connects with the universal storehouse of wisdom, from which it draws through what we call intuition. It is through this connection to the universal that we can rise higher than our source of subconscious wisdom and knowledge gained in previous incarnations. To grow, we need the superconscious wisdom that is all. Just as by desire and concentration, we can recall the knowledge and wisdom gained in previous incarnations, so by desire and concentration directed toward the universal, the infinite, we call to us even greater wisdom and knowledge than hitherto realized. The body that disintegrates after death is only a collection of cellular cocoons from which organized cellular souls have flown to new states of being. With its soul, the body loses its sensation, the atoms disintegrate, each becoming what it was before, simply a bit of dead matter that is not dead at all. The atoms of matter are exactly the same after death as before, but the organizing and informing spirit and soul, spirit or soul, for there is no dividing line between them, have departed, leaving each atom to live its little life again, unrelated to other atoms. Without this organizing spirit to attract and hold the atoms together, they separate from ashes to ashes. The cell is the unitary organization of the body. Each cell is lined with many atoms. The soul of the cell leaves it, just as the soul leaves the body as a whole. That the astral body is an organization of cell souls, just as the physical body is an organization of cells, I have no doubt at this point. And it seems reasonable to me to suppose that the soul or astral body carries with it all the records of all the experiences of the individual from the beginning of time, that with every incarnation and experience this astral grows in wisdom and knowledge and beauty of character. I see no reason to doubt, and by the power of universal attraction, it is drawn in each reincarnation to the exact kindred and condition it needs to aid its growth in grace. Chapter 4. How to focus. Without goal definition, nothing can be achieved. With an overly defined objective, very little can be accomplished. This is the paradigm of all achievement. It sounds difficult, but it is actually very easy, so easy that a child lives it. The key to the problem is this: no man lives to himself and no man dies to himself. We are all members of each other. All of creation moves toward a distant divine event, whose definite details no human being has yet grasped. Perhaps none will ever comprehend it, for how can the hand or the foot conceive of the structure and purposes of the whole body? There is a universal goal which includes and drives all individual goals. There is one great intelligence, one spirit, one purpose at work in every human being. The plan of salvation is not a mere superstitious myth. Certainly there is a plan, a divine event, in which we are all working, whether we know it or not. There is a divine ideal calling each of us. Even the fool who has said in his heart that there is no God, no unity of life and purpose, catches glimpses of it. As our bodies are all members of the body of God, so our ideals are members of the universal ideal. Our goals are members of the universal goal. Your hand can understand and define its impulse to grasp or release, but can it understand and define your aim and purpose, which gave it the impulse? We can imagine that the hand understands its own movements, but can it understand your movements and purpose? The hand says, I want to grasp this, but can it understand in any sense your purpose, which made it want to grasp? Then you say, I want to paint pictures, or I want to earn money, or I want to teach school, or I want to be a housewife and mother, or I want to build bridges. But can you say why you want to do these things or others? Can you define the great want of which your individual want is only a bud? Can you see the universal ideal of which your ideal is a detail? No, you can see your individual want, but the universal want is too big for you to understand from your point of view. Did you ever say to yourself, I want to be a bridge builder? Then, after you had become a successful bridge builder, did you find yourself a little disgusted with the bridge business? Did you find yourself saying, I want to be a painter instead of a bridge builder, and you couldn't imagine why your desires were not being satisfied by bridge building? Can you imagine the hand feeling upset because, after holding onto the book for a while, you find yourself wanting to let go? Of course, the hand would not understand why it could not remain constant in its first desire. It would see no reason to let go. So are we, members of the stupendous whole. Universal purpose and desire play through us. We know we want this and we don't want that. When we are on the animal plane, we simply satisfy our desires when we can, and we are satisfied until another desire drives us. Eventually, we begin to reason about our desires. We call some of them good and satisfy them if we can. We call some of them bad and fight them with all our puny strength, and we are correspondingly unhappy. In both cases, we fail to see why we want what we want. When after we have learned to build bridges, we find ourselves wanting to paint pictures, we resist the desire and go on building bridges. Then, if the universal purpose really wants us to stop building bridges and make pictures, it keeps pushing us in the new direction until we finally find a way to paint. If we are too stubborn, the universal will pushes us away and lifts our sons and daughters to paint the pictures. It goes like this. In response to the universal want, you have taught your good right hand to thread needles and sew until it can almost do it in the dark. All the nerves and brains and muscles in your fingertips have learned that little trick. Now, in response to a new universal want, you decide that that good right hand of yours is going to learn to play scales on the piano. You sit down at the piano, put your hand in position, and push to play the notes. But this kind of thing is completely new to your fingers. Every little muscle is stiff. Every nerve and every little part of the finger's brain protests that it can't play scales. It doesn't know how. Its job is to sew, it can't, so it can't. You say to yourself, how stiff my fingers are and how rebellious. They won't listen to me at all. But you keep sending your will towards them. You practice long hours every day, and little by little you discover that your fingers have learned the new trick and can do it without you having to think, and will it especially. You kept pouring your wanting into that hand until it became the wanting and willing of the hand. From working against your wanting, the hand has come to work with it and for it. Why did you do this? Because the universal want kept pouring into you until you began the practice. Just as you poured the want into your hands until they too wanted to do it and did it. Were your fingers especially unruly? Did they struggle and tangle and imitate the movements of others? Then what did you do with them? You kept them at it, and you kept them at it much longer than you would if they were more obedient fingers. You kept them practicing until they learned to do the work willingly. with interest, artistically. Then you gave them beautiful things to play with, instead of hard things to work with. Of course, the beautiful things to play with are made of exactly the same kind of things your fingers have been working hard on. But the monotony of repetition is completely gone from beautiful play. It is a joy to play. It's hard work to practice scales. But without all those scales, there can never be a satisfying game. In practice, we learn through repetition to do one thing at a time, well and gracefully. In play, we unite all these movements into a satisfying game of joy and praise. We wait for the perfection of the action that alone makes satisfying play possible, so we keep practicing. The more our fingers rebel, the longer and more persistently we keep them at it. That is all. Now the universal wanting keeps us at things in the same way. The universal is bringing about a glorious ideal of perfect play, in which every member of itself will shine forth obedient, flexible to play with grace and full joy, the music of the spheres. You and I, being more or less rigid, disobedient and dense, have to be held to our practices until we learn to do them well. We say, "Oh, if only I could find my right niche, but I seem to be held here in spite of all I can do." We say we don't like the kind of routine we are condemned to. There must be something wrong with the universe, or with economic or family conditions, or we wouldn't have to work at one thing when we are ready for something else, or we want to do something else. Our fingers cry out in the same way when we hold them on scales. "Oh," they cry, "why are we forced into this common monotonous repetition when our souls yearn for beautiful harmonies?" You see, it never occurs to them that they are bound to this monotonous practice of scales because they long for beautiful harmonies and happy playing. And it doesn't readily occur to us that we are held back in our dishwashing, our business routine, our bridge building, because our souls yearn for greater things. But it is so. The perfection of great ideals can never be achieved except through the perfection of the details, and through the dishwashing, the business routine, the bridge building, we are perfecting the details of self-control, of body and brain control, that will enable us to play the great harmonies that our souls already feel. The great things we feel and desire without being able to express them comprise the universal ideal to which every soul aims, whether it knows it or not. The perfection of this great ideal we see as through a smoked glass darkly. We get all sorts of half-baked glimpses of it and spend much time arguing about it. But none of us really knows even a small part of the glory and beauty and joy of that universal ideal which includes and acts upon all our personal ideals. It has not yet manifested what we shall be. But we know that when the great ideal appears, we shall all have our places in the joy of its beauty, for each of us will have had his place and done his part in the realization of that ideal. The universal ideal is gently urging us toward an ineffable good, but none of us can conceive of the details of the good that is yet to appear. We all hope and work for this indeterminate good, as Hanford Henderson calls it. It constitutes our great ideal, which includes all our lesser and fleeting ideals and even our passing wishes and desires. It is with our great ideals that the definition of goal is in error. An indeterminate good necessarily requires a general goal. It is not enough to say, "I know exactly where the flowers will appear when the earth blooms as a rose, and I know exactly the day when they will appear. Therefore I will plow only those exact places and prepare my ascension clothes for that exact hour." The man who is so sure of his great goal will, sooner or later, like Perkins in Quincy Adams' Sawyer, find himself perched on the ridge with his white robes billowing in the cold night, and his goods in someone else's possession. When one is overconfident of the distant divine event, he entangles the present opportunity to hasten that event. Wisdom is before him that hath understanding, but the eyes of a fool are in the ends of the earth. The man who is too sure of the indeterminate good misses the present good. The man who aims at the great good which he cannot attain misses the small good near him which needs to be attained. What would we think of a hunter who aimed only at the big game out of reach of his gun, while the small game frolicked at his feet? We would think him a fool who deserved to starve, of course. We miss our opportunities by striving for big game out of our reach. The great ideal should have our faith rather than our aim. Aim only for what is within reach, and trust the big things to time and spirit. You are in the now, keep your aim on the things of the now. Then your aim will gain accuracy and you will be ready for the big things when they finally appear in the now. Where are you now? Are you building bridges? Then aim to build this one better than any other that has ever been built. Aim to improve your work now. Aim to enjoy it all. For only as joy enlightens you, can you see how to improve your work and methods. And competence in bridge building means freedom to follow your next ideal. The more competent you are, the nearer you will get to the top, and the more money you will get for your work. And the more money you have, the more time you can devote to working on your next ideal. As you become progressively more competent in your work, the flow of money will increase. To the extent that you enjoy your work, you will grow in efficiency and money. The slave is tied to his work because he does not put into it the love, interest, and joy necessary to make it progressively competent. He says that lack of money prevents him from entering a new line of work. That is exactly right. The universal spirit that drives us keeps money away from us until we have gained in this thing the necessary competence to adapt ourselves to other work. Are you building bridges and at the same time aiming to paint pictures? And are you too poor to give up bridge building and devote all your time to painting pictures? Then I tell you to have faith in your desire to paint pictures, because your desire is an outgrowth of universal desire and is destined to find its fulfillment. Your desire is the desire of omnipotence, omniscience, which will not be disappointed in any way. All desires will be fulfilled in the fullness of time. Do you want to hasten time? Then have faith in your desire, but aim at building bridges. Improve and improve the work you find until the way opens to a new line of work, and make every detail of your bridge building as if it were the painting of the larger picture. Do you think that precision of observation, delicacy of touch, harmony of thought, and power of expression are gained only by smearing paint on a canvas with a camera hairbrush? No. Bridge building has its place in the training of a great painter. Put your soul into it while you are retained in it, and give it its full opportunity to do the work. Have faith in your desire to paint pictures, but direct your energies toward the bridge you are building now. Keep your faith high, your aim true, and truly in an hour, when you least expect it, the path from bridge building to painting pictures will open up. Chapter 5. The Substance of Things. To some extent, I have been benefited by these teachings. In some respects, they do not seem to have a very practical result. It is possible to concentrate and obtain small things, but any real change in the environment seems quite dependent on circumstances entirely beyond my own control. H.B. So writes a myopic and faithless person, faithless because of his myopia. Another woman who has observed the same things writes thus, "If I don't see great results now, I know it is because I am working for great things. Life concentrates on a mushroom and makes it grow in one night, but an oak tree requires 20 years of concentration. A woman concentrates on a good dinner, a little sewing, the control of her tongue for an hour, $5 for a new hat, the cure of a headache, and success crowns every effort. These are small things, the mushrooms of an hour, soon used and soon forgotten. The same woman concentrates for a complete change in disposition or environment, for anything that in fact seems to be far removed from present conditions. Now, if she is a myopic woman, she has little or no faith in anything she cannot see, hear, taste, smell, or feel. She can see, taste, and smell a mushroom, so she believes in it. He could see an oak tree and believe in that. But it cannot see the acorn growing underground, so it has no faith that there is an oak tree growing. And if there is already a small oak tree in sight, she cannot see it growing, no matter how hard she looks at it. Therefore, she fears that the oak tree is not growing. But the woman of broad vision is different. She sees through things, she feels the intangible. She hears, smells, and tastes that which moves over the face of the deep and brings things into being. She touches the true substance, that which is beneath, of things yet to be. Her faith rests in the invisible life. The faith of the other woman rests only in the visible things that life has made. To say that H.B. has no faith would be a lie. Every living thing is full of faith, or else it could not live. Faith is in the environment, and we live by using it, just as a fish lives by using water. Faith springs eternally in every human breast, nourished from the universal source. To speak of one's little faith or one's much faith is like speaking of the squaring of the earth. Every soul lives by faith and in abundance, but lives by faith in what? Therein lies the rub. Until we come out of a sense of materiality, and no one has ever pulled more than his nose out of these muddy waters, we live by faith in things seen, smelled, tasted, heard, and felt. These are the only things with which we are familiar. To them, we fix our faith and pride ourselves on our good sense, reason, and lack of superstition. I cannot believe in anything unless I can see it, is our satisfied cry. You cannot fool me with your religious trick, nor with your rabbit's foot and horseshoe and four-leaf clover. I see no connection between a rabbit's foot and your good luck, therefore I know there is no connection. I cannot see a great God on a great white throne. Consequently, I know none exists. Show me your God. Show me the string that connects the four-leaf clover with your good luck, and I will put my faith in it. The material does not count without its invisible host. In time, the invisible begins to play with him. His beautiful plans, every step of which he could see clearly, fall apart. He can't see why. Things he had so much faith in begin to wobble and fall around him. He can't see why. Reluctantly, he begins to see that there are powerful forces he cannot see. His whole beautiful material world begins to dance to the rhythm of strings he cannot see. Then there are things he can't see, hear, smell, taste, or feel. They may be a lot of fear and chaos, they seem to be, but they are there after all, your certainty that you could see, smell, hear, taste, and feel the all. And he begins to reach for those invisible things. He looks and looks in the darkness and the silence, and as he looks, his beliefs gradually loosen their grip on the old visible things and begin to reach out into the darkness and silence. He sends his beliefs probing, feeling their way through the invisible, ever seeking the strings to which the visible things have been dancing and staggering. At first all is darkness, but little by little faith grasps something invisible. There is something there that disposes what man proposes, an invisible something, untasted, unheard, unsmelled, unsensed. A terrible something it may be, but still a something, all-powerful, all-present. It has sent its tentacles into the invisible and has touched God, the soul, the life principle, which makes and unmakes, gives and takes away all those little things to which he used to cling to his beliefs. The next thing is to discover the nature of this mighty something whose home is in the invisible. But how to discover the nature of the invisible? Not by touch, taste, smell, sight, or hearing, at least not at first. But by its fruits you will know whether a tree is good or bad. By its fruits you will know whether the invisible powers are beneficial or evil. And the material is familiar with fruits, with things. He himself built such beautiful things, so he should be a judge of the fruits of labor. The fruits of his labor were all good, he knows they were. If only the great invisible had not spoiled them all. Oh, the labors of the invisible brought his own good efforts to naught. The invisible must be a terrible and evil power. His fruits are the destruction of his own good constructions. They fear this great invisible power to which their beliefs are beginning to cling. But wait, good is beginning to rise from the ashes of their ruins. This terrible calamity is turning into a blessing. New and greater things are forming to take the place of the lost fruits, and they are good. Oh, this great invisible works in terrifying mystery, but its fruits are good. It is now ready to come to God. He begins to see the unseen things, and his beliefs tend them. Those who want to come to him must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Those who want to understand, feel, and use the invisible forces must believe that they exist, and that they reward those who diligently seek to understand and use them. Invisible things move the visible world. The material, being bound by its beliefs to the things of the world, moves as the world moves. He is simply a puppet in the hands of the invisible powers. By letting go of the beliefs that bound him to the world and sending his tentacles of faith into the invisible, he becomes one with the powers that pull the strings of the world. Faith is the substance, the underlying and creative principle of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. The faith of the material is united with things already seen. Therefore, its creative principle is poured into the thing already created. Then, life plays and pulls things until the beliefs of the material are loosed from their material moorings, and go feeling toward the unseen in search of new things to cling to. When the whole heap of visible things has failed us, when houses, land, money, friends, and even fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters have turned their backs on us, what is left for us to cling to? And without something to have faith in, how could we live at all? We could not live without beliefs to sustain us. Witness the suicides and deaths from broken hearts. And if all visible things have failed us, if our beliefs have been detached from fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, friends, houses and lands, where else can our beliefs take strength again, except in the region of the invisible? The region where the wind blows where it wills and you hear the sound of it, but you know not whence it comes, nor whither it goes. The region of substance, of creative power. It seems very terrible to have our beliefs detached from fathers, mothers, brothers, friends, houses and lands, but it is good for us, as time always proves. Detached from the effects of creative energy, our beliefs reach the invisible and tend to the energy itself. From a state of oneness with things, we evolve to a new being at one with the creative power within things. What are the invisible things to which our torn beliefs begin to cling? Our faith itself is invisible, the substance of things hoped for, the substantial evidence of things not yet seen. What do we hope for that we have not yet seen? First of all, we hope for peace, another of the invisible and substantial things. We hope for love, the most substantial of the invisible things. Oh, if only we had peace and love, we could count everything else as good lost. And lo, through the unseen tentacles of faith, our bruised beliefs attach themselves to the invisible substance of peace and love. Wisdom is an invisible substance. Our unseen beliefs attach themselves to the invisible source of wisdom. Thought is invisible. Our beliefs detached from things begin to reach the invisible realm of thought. Ideals are invisible things. Our beliefs, detached from the already realized, begin to tend toward the invisible ideals. The ideals of the race, the ideals of the family, and finally, our individual ideals. Our invisible beliefs become one with these invisible ideals, and through these little tentacles of faith, we literally begin to draw the ideal into our physical being and into the visible world. Through our tentacles of faith, the ideal is literally expressed, squeezed out into visibility. When our beliefs were tied to material things, being negative to us, sucked the life out of us. Now, our tentacles of faith reach upward to the invisible ideal realm of the true substance of life, to which we are negative, and by the same law of dynamics, it is we who extract life. We extract it from the invisible realm of the true substance of life. We ourselves could do nothing. The things to which our beliefs bound us sucked the life out of us, and the invisible powers finally tore us away. But now that we are bound by our beliefs to the invisible, the Father in us and through us does the works of righteousness that bring peace. And behold, we are filled with the invisible power, and through our faith in the invisible we pass the fruits of the Spirit, which are love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. And being filled with the power of the invisible, we pass on the fruits of the Spirit to fathers, mothers, brothers, friends, houses, lands. We pass them on in every act of life and in every breath we take. We exhale what, through our tentacles of faith, the great invisible breathes into us. Then behold, what is written is fulfilled. You shall receive 100-fold houses and lands and fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters at this present time. You shall have them to use at will. As long as you were bound by your beliefs to things, they used you. Now you use them. Secure your beliefs to invisible things and let patience do its perfect work. Thus you will realize the complete desire of your heart. Let things move as they will. Let facts be stubborn and conditions be difficult if necessary. Pay no attention to them. To attend to them is to secure your beliefs to them. Attend to the invisible things. Secure your beliefs to your ideals. Disregard facts and difficult conditions. Believe in the invisible. Direct your beliefs upward. Whatsoever ye ask, believe that ye receive it, and ye shall have it for sure. If it is a mushroom, expect it in one night. If you desire a great oak tree, give it time to grow. In due time, perhaps in an hour when you least expect it, it will surely appear. All that is necessary is to secure your small beliefs to the invisible source of all things. Believe in the great invisible part of yourself and the universe. Chapter 6. Attaining Substance. All desirable and as yet unexpressed things are in the silence waiting to be brought into expression through aspiration and inspiration. Of course, one can aspire and inspire anywhere and under almost any conditions. I remember a great aspiration of mine that was fulfilled while sitting on a crowded streetcar with people standing in front of me and others clinging to the railing. The silent things are present everywhere, permeating solid things as X-rays do. All creation cannot stop a man from communing with the invisible at any time and in any place. All creation cannot stop him except when he allows it. But therein lies the rub. He allows it to interfere unless he is in an almost anguished fervor for things invisible. That momentous hour on the crowded streetcar came after weeks of very earnest searching, after weeks of almost constant concentration on this one thing I wanted to receive from the invisible. I was so absorbed in that one thing that the crowds meant nothing to me. To get anything, wisdom, power, love, from silence, all interest must be absorbed in the subject. Your interest is like the diaphragm in a camera. It receives impressions only from what it is focused on, and the camera must be held firmly in one position until the impression is received. The human camera receives impressions of the invisible in exactly the same way it receives impressions of the visible world. But it takes longer to receive a complete impression of the invisible, just as it takes longer to get a good negative in the dark. The invisible is darkness to us. Therefore, it often takes a long time to get a full impression of anything we wish to receive in silence. It takes a longer exposure to get the impression. Concentration is simply the steady exposure of attention, of interest, on the thing we wish to realize to make it tangible. Now, the busy person, the person who is interested in 1,000 things, keeps his interest so busy taking snapshots that he has no time to get impressions of the invisible. His mind is constantly jumping from one thing to another. When he suddenly turns toward the invisible, he simply scans the darkness quickly and returns to earth without any impressions. Instead of a constant aspiration toward the ideal, there is a constant perspiration toward the real. Since there is nothing new under the sun, the only progress is made around and around the same old things. The only real relief from things as they are lies in the invisible. The only way to access relief is to concentrate on the invisible things. To do this, attention must be diverted from the visible things. The mind must be set on things above and remain so until renewal is complete. People who are not yet satisfied that the visible world cannot satisfy and cannot see the need to enter into silence on set occasions. And there is another class who do not see the need for it, the class whose concentration on the invisible is so constant that material things assume the subordinate relationship. These are people who have obtained the truth by passing through great tribulations, who have traversed the gamut of things and found the principle behind things. And almost invariably, if not always, I have never heard of an exception, these are people who have tried almost every method of spiritual culture in existence, have practiced fasting and prayer, breathing exercises, negations and affirmations, and treatments and concentrations of every conceivable kind. Martin Luther was one of them, and finally, when he had tried everything else and was crawling down the church steps on all fours, he found the truth. He immediately arose, repudiated all his good works as useless, and began to praise and preach that not by works but by faith we are healed. 8 or 10 years ago, I heard Paul Milits, who had worked for years at all kinds of spiritual, mental, and breathing exercises, repudiate everything as unnecessary. None of this stuff does you any good, he said, and others who have found the truth reiterate the same claim. And yet each of them has found the truth through those very practices. If Martin Luther had stopped before crawling down those church steps, as his own seeking spirit indicated, he would never have found the truth. If Milits, Shelton, Burnell, etc., had stopped one of their practices, they would still be seeking. The spirit in every man commands him to do things and refrain from doing others, in order to save himself from something or other. Is this universal urge just a lie? No. These concentration exercises are kindergarten methods by which we learn to use ourselves. When through practice we have learned, We discard the kindergarten methods. What was gained by conscious effort becomes habit. We become intuitive towards the invisible, whereas before we only came to it by conscious effort, by special practices. But why disown practices? Why tell others who are trying to learn that their efforts are useless? By practices we find the way. Why discourage practice? There are people who are still wrapped up in the material. There are those who are involved in the invisible. None of these currently need set times to concentrate on the invisible, on the ideal side of life. But there is a third great middle class who are not absorbed in the already manifested world and who want to be one with the invisible world of causality. To these I say, follow the example of all adepts of all ages. Practice concentration. To all who want to achieve something I say, enter into silence regularly to gain power and wisdom to achieve it. To those whose interest is primarily in the material world, but who want to understand and be deeply interested in the invisible world, from whence all things come, I say, enter into silence at regular intervals every day. To all mankind who yearn for something, I say, all things are in the silence. Be still and know. Chapter 7. The Spirit and the Individual. I was washing the breakfast dishes one morning when it occurred to me to go and visit a friend who lived several miles away. I finished my work and began to dress for my trip, when I was overcome with a feeling of depression, hopelessness, or sadness that I could not understand. I kept getting ready, all the while trying to reason that feeling away. But it wouldn't go away. Finally, I put on my hat and gloves and headed for the door, when a heaviness came over me and I backed into my room and sat down and said, God, I want to know what the meaning of all this is. The answer came loud, clear, and firm. Stay home. I stayed, and as I took off my hat, gloves, and cloak, I felt so light I seemed to walk on air. At that moment I assumed that the voice, I call it a voice for lack of a more definite term, had told me to stay home because someone would be coming to me for help. This was my first year as a teacher and healer, but no one came that day nor that night, and the thought crossed my mind that maybe it was all nonsense after all, and I could have gone. Well, the result was that the train I would have taken met with a terrible accident in which many were killed or seriously injured. This is just one of many similar experiences I have had. I waste no time in reasoning things out. The world has tried for 1900 years to follow reason, and look at the result. I follow my intuition and it never fails me. Flora Pearl Howard. We must not belittle or deny one's reason. It is its crowning glory, created to be used. But it is not all the wisdom to which a man has access, nor is it the greatest. The man who extols his understanding above the wisdom of the rest of creation and non-creation is a fool and will surely end in disgrace. But he who rejoices in his personal understanding or reason, as the means by which he accesses the source of all wisdom, is on his way to benefit from his own intelligence and the universal intelligence besides. Everyone knows that foresight is not as good as hindsight. He has demonstrated this fact many times, with many falls from his high horse. Actually, it seems as if he may have learned at this time not to be so sure about his reason. After Mrs. Howard learned that the train on which she intended to ride had met with an accident, she saw clearly why it was unwise for her to take that particular train. Her reason had been enlightened, her hindsight honed. Why? By universal intelligence. Suppose New York City stood as the center of all wisdom. Suppose it said, "What I cannot reason about is not worth knowing." Suppose it continued to issue decrees to the whole world, but disregarded the messages received. What do you think would happen? It would collapse within a week. It is because of receiving all those messages about what is going on outside that she can reason out her business problems and send messages that move the world. Exalting New York knowledge and reason and disregarding outside knowledge and reason would quickly ruin her. Intuition is the wireless line by which we receive instructions from all other stations in the universe. After Mrs. Howard had received and obeyed her message of the universal, a few days later, she knew why she had been so directed. He who is full of his own concept is eternally despising his intuitions, following his old-fashioned reasons, and getting into accidents. Then he wonders why he is treated so badly. You see, none of us have been down this road before. This day is a new day. This stretch of road has never been traveled before. No one can know for the reason what we're going to run into just ahead around the bend. You can make a rough guess, but you can't know. But there is something that whether or not you know consciously what it is or will be, as you turn that corner, there is something that can and does send over the wireless line a message to stay away, or to get closer, as the case may be. Now, Mrs. Howard was a woman who did not wish to be in such a clash, and believed that her intuitions would keep her away from them. Now, next to Mrs. Howard, there might have lived another woman, as good as Mrs. Howard, as devoted to her intuitions, who received a message to go on that train. Just as Mrs. Howard's heart grew heavy, and she heard the message, "Stay home," this other woman's heart grew light, and she heard the message, "Go." So she set off cheerfully for the train. She climbed the steps and entered the carriage, and walked past several empty seats before she felt the impression to sit down. She sat down and happily looked out the window. In time, as they sped along, there was a sudden crash and shouts and hisses of steam. Then there was work to be done. This neighbor of Mrs. Howard's, beyond a little jolt from which she almost instantly recovered, was not injured at all. There were dead and dying in front of her and behind her, but she was safe. There was work to be done, and she was there to do it. You see, this woman was a physician and surgeon, and the only one on the train. She had spent years preparing for that job, and she believed her intuitions would lead her, strong and healthy, to opportunities like this. So the message that depressed Mrs. Howard brought light to this woman's soul. Each received and interpreted the message according to her own particular character. And what about the wounded and dead? They too were led by the Spirit, each by their own self-constructed character, related to their particular destiny. I would not be surprised if many of them did so by filling the accident and crime columns of the daily newspapers. The man who thinks in terms of accident is very likely to meet them, but probably more of the victims were swept away by their false religion. The man who thinks of himself, who really thinks of himself in his heart, who thinks of himself as a vulgar worm and a great sinner deserving of a bad end, and yet has not repented, is daily more closely associated with all kinds of violent and horrible things. And everywhere and at all times, the violent man, the energetic man, no matter how good he may be, is preparing to be led into any catastrophe that suits him. There is no randomness in our destinies. We get just what we are prepared for. And throughout all ages, we have been preparing, and still are. Whoever is not busy preparing for the best is relating to the least good. Whoever prepares to die with his boots on will die that way. Whoever prepares for accidents will die in an accident. He who prepares for life may never see death again. When bubonic plague is about to appear in a place, all the birds fly away. What warned them? Oh, that was just instinct, something common, which we wise beings never use. Before Mount Pelée spat destruction, all the wild animals, none of whom could have had any personal knowledge or any record of the science of volcanoes, fled from the vicinity. The domestic animals moaned and huddled, and those that could ran far away. Then people's hearts began to sink, and the more ignorant ran after the animals. As Mount Pelée became more emphatic in his prophecies, all hearts became heavier, and all souls heard the message, "Go away." Then there was a hasty preparation for a speedy exodus. But no, the wise, educated, sensible men put their heads together and decided that they would not be and the others would not be guided by such a commonplace thing as instinct or by their own sinking hearts. No, though their hearts would fall into their shoes and their knees would tremble and their teeth would chatter, they would be sensible, they would use their divine reason, the Mount Pelée had never destroyed them before, and it would not do so now. So the wise reasoners locked up the poor fools, and they were well locked up, only one escaped. Now exactly what that spirit is like that tries to guide us into all truth is something I don't know. But I do know that there is a spirit that pervades and would like to save all creatures from harm, both by intuition, the spirit's witness with my spirit, and by actual and repeated experiences of both kinds. I have been guided by spirit into paths of pleasure, peace, and abundance, and before that, I despised spirit and went my own way into all kinds of trouble. And I have a theory based on Spirit's testimony with mine as to what this Spirit is and how it acts. Spirit is the universal intelligence that fills this universe so full that there is no room for anything else. There are only little eddies and currents and countercurrents in this great ocean of intelligence. And you are one eddy in it, and I am another. And each of us creates little eddies and currents that move us and move other things toward us. And when a leaf floats near, it is drawn into our whirlpool. But when we turn next to a rock, the rock does not move, and neither do we. We are not related to the rock. When gold is placed next to a horseshoe magnet, it stays still. The magnet and the gold are not interested in each other, but that doesn't prove that the magnet is stupid and dead. No, there is a great current of longing in that magnet. If it had means of locomotion, it would travel the world searching, maybe never knowing exactly what it is searching for, but still searching. And in time, he would begin to feel a definite inclination to go in a certain direction. Now, if he is just a dumb magnet with no great pride in his brain, he will follow that definite inclination. And as it travels, the power of attraction will grow, and it will travel faster, and lo and behold, it will fly into the arms of its affinity, a bar of steel. And it will cling, and the bar will cling, and joy will be born. It takes two and an exchange of intelligence for joy to be born. Or maybe our magnet will stay home and yearn, until it attracts steel filings to itself. This is not as fantastic as you might suppose. All things are intelligent. All things are exerting their little compulsions upon all creation for satisfaction, and in due time, all compulsions will be satisfied. The great sea is boiling with intelligence, and the affinities are gathering. It is the attraction of magnet to steel that constitutes what I call spirit. That attraction is intelligence. When in doubt about the meaning of your solar center feelings, do nothing. Go back, as Mrs. Howard did, sit down, be still, ask for the meaning, and obey. Chapter 8. By Twisty Ways. Reverend Robert Foreman Horton tells a little story of a remarkable answer to prayer. He was with a tour group in Norway. While exploring a wild, swampy area, one of the ladies lost one of her galoshes. The overlay could not be replaced until they reached Bergen at the end of their tour, and it was impossible to attempt to explore that wilderness area without rubber boots. The galoshes had to be found, or the tour would be curtailed. As you can imagine, each member of the group set about diligently searching for the lost rubber. Again and again they scoured the miles of meadows and mountain slopes they had traversed. Finally, they gave it up for lost and returned to the hotel. But in the afternoon, Dr. Horton had an idea. Why not pray to find the shoe? So he prayed. And they paddled back up the fjord to the morning landing, and he got off and walked straight to the galoshes in a place he would have sworn he had searched repeatedly before. I remember a similar experience of my own. There were 4 of us cycling along a rather sandy road some distance from town. 2 were pedaling in tandem a little ahead of us on a downhill slope. When a rivet flew off and the chain fell off, the tandem kept rolling a quarter-mile downhill and stopped on the next climb, so our friends were able to ride down without injury. By this time, we caught up with them, having followed their trajectory and learned for the first time the cause of their stop. Of course, everyone's immediate thought was, oh, we'll never be able to find that little grey rivet in this grey dust. The other bikes probably rode over it and the house is 3 miles away. But we all retraced our steps, searching diligently. 2 of the group are excellent rifle shooters with very keen eyesight. I thought one of these 2 might find the rivet, but we all walked slowly back, far beyond the point where they realized their loss, and no one saw the rivet. Then it occurred to me that the High Spirit had not been called to our aid. Immediately, I said to myself, Spirit, you know where the rivet is. I thought of Spirit as the law of love or attraction, which is the principle of all creation, and instantly the idea arose that the little rivet could attract the attention of the eye if the eye were willing to be attracted. These words floated into my mind: rivet, 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 my eye. By this time, I had fallen behind the others, so I walked quietly, calmly, along, eyes willing, and those words kept repeating over and over in my mind, and the rivet drew my eye. I, who considered myself very slow of sight, found the rivet, and I know it was because I turned to the universal being, to God, to the law of attraction for the help I needed, for the knowledge that none of us had in consciousness, but which was certainly present in the universal mind in which we live, move, and exist. Just the other day, I had a little experience that illustrates the idea that man's dire need is God's opportunity. For years I have said that I can never find ready-to-wear garments that fit me. I have tried many times. The waist's always too short and narrow in front, the sleeves tight. But I keep trying, every year, because everything is evolving, you know, even clothes and tailors. I wanted a new white lawn cloth shirt and wondered if I couldn't find one ready to wear. I tried the biggest suit store in Springfield. Nothing good. Then one day I had an impulse to try the better places in Holyoke. One or two almost, but nothing that did the trick. I gave it up. Then I had another impulse to try a store. I've always said, I never found anything there that I wanted. I almost passed the store by saying to myself, there's no use trying there and it's too late anyway. But the thought arose, or rather the impression, that the Spirit was urging me on and I had better go. We'll see if it is the Spirit, I said to myself. I think it is. It was. I found the shirt I wanted, and I also found a nice white lawn suit, in the most unlikely corner of the vicinity, according to my judgment and experience. There's a little law here that I want you to notice. The Spirit guides us through impressions or attractions, and it is limited in its revelations by our mental composition, which is the conscious and dominant part of us. Why didn't the Spirit impress me in the first place to go to that store, where that shirt and dress had been waiting for me since spring, and I had wanted them since spring? The Spirit did impress me about it, but when the Spirit said shirt, I said Springfield. If they don't have a fit there, they won't have it anywhere, and anyway, I know I'll never find it. But I tried no faith. That quieted the Spirit for the moment. But at the first opportunity, on the first evening when I wasn't too busy to even think about such things, the Spirit whispered shirt to me again. And I didn't let the Spirit go any further with its impressions. Instead of asking the Spirit where to go for a shirt, I said, oh yes, shirt, of course, I'll go to that store where I usually find other things I like. You see, my usual mind, preconceived opinions, again settled the matter. It wasn't until I gave up on finding anything in these places and was walking right past the door of the other store that the Spirit even had a chance to whisper its name to me. The Spirit had to take me around all my prejudices in the matter before it could make me think of that place. My mind was open to the thought of the shirt, but it was firmly closed against the idea of that particular store. At least, the direct mental route to that store was closed, so the Spirit had to lead me around through back-alley brain connections. But now the direct route is open. Spirit always goes shopping with me, and almost always the direct mental routes are open, so I have a lot of fun shopping, never waste much time on it, and almost always get what I want. Often at bargain prices, although I almost never look at the bargain ads in the newspapers. But many times I have gone into a store to buy a certain thing and found a great special sale on that very item. Do you think these are very trivial things to worry the Spirit about? I don't. The Spirit is omniscient, omnipotent, it is everywhere present, and its chief end and joy is to guide people aright. The Spirit is like a universal watchman to untangle the entanglements between supply and demand in all departments of life. And I think it is a rather careless or foolish individual who does not consult it in every little dilemma. And I notice that despite this thought, I find myself ignoring the Spirit, thinking that I know, of course, where I should go to buy a shirt. It seems hard to remember that the store of life is always growing and changing, so that we can always save time, money, and unnecessary wandering by asking Spirit. Herein lies the secret of all our little experiences, when it seems our Spirit guidance was wrong and our prayers, longings, and desires unanswered. Spirit never fails us. It is we who grow weary of following the Spirit, who must lead us to the desired goal through our own mental paths. You see, it is a matter of opening new roads in our mental domain, so that it is not necessary for the Spirit to take us through such indirect paths. It is a matter of clearing our rocky prejudices, so that we do not have to travel around them. And here the Spirit helps us again. As soon as the Spirit managed to take me around all my prejudices, and into that tent I cleared the prejudice. So now there is a straight mental street where it didn't exist before. Next time Spirit says shirt to me, it can send me straight to DS if it wants to. Yes, Spirit moves in mysterious ways to perform its wonders. It seems mysterious to us until we are guided back on the straight path. Then it is so simple, so easy, that we can hardly believe that Spirit would deign to do it. Ah, but it does. Nothing is too small or too great for the Spirit's attention if we believe. When we do not believe, we are to be pitied, and the Spirit is quietly silent. Chapter 9. The Spirit, the Breath of Life. My healer teaches that I must depend on Spirit alone, that breathing exercises, food, sunlight and air must not be the dependence for health. He says, "Why, can't you help breathing?" That is sheer nonsense. Sunlight and air are spirit, and the plain truth of the matter is that if you don't use them, all your dependence on spirit will be of absolutely no use. Try living in a northern room with the windows closed, and you will see. You cannot help breathing, but your breathing is of no use unless by it you inhale good living spirit in the form of pure air and sunlight. If we all lived under the sun and slept under the stars, that healer's advice might be good enough. But we don't. We live in closed, dark rooms from which the Spirit of life has fled, leaving only its discarded effluvium. You can't help but breathe, but what do we breathe? We breathe the dead air of closed rooms. Spirit is life, and we live by breathing it. Spirit is in fresh air is in spirit. Fresh air and spirit are one. Dead air is air minus spirit, or life. What is the use of saying you depend on spirit when you do not? When you shut yourself away from the Spirit of life and breathe the death, pure air and sunlight are spirit specially prepared for your use. What is the use of pretending to depend on spirit when you shut yourself up in rooms from which spirit has fled? If you live in locked rooms, you can assert your dependence on spirit until you are black in the face, and you can be treated every hour of the day by this healer and 10,000 more like him, and the result will be only sickness and death. I know in my heart and soul and mind that this is true, and I have seen the truth of it demonstrated by hundreds of cases of people who did not recover with treatments of any kind, and then did recover with sunlight, fresh air and full breathing, along with mental treatment. The gospel of fresh air is more necessary for human beings than even the gospel of new thought. If we understood and applied the gospel of fresh air, we would think correctly without effort. It is in dark and airless corners that evil thoughts breed, because the Spirit of life is not present there in a form that can be appropriated by human beings. There they receive the breath of death and generate thoughts to match distorted thoughts of death, evil, and despair. Come into the sun and breathe the breath of life, which generates in you the new thought of life, love, wisdom, truth, health, happiness, success. The new thought will not save you unless you live it, and a little observation and experimentation will show you that you cannot live it without breathing plenty of fresh air. If all is spirit, why does this healer tell you that to regulate your breathing, exercise, food, etc., is to depend on something outside of spirit? The truth of the matter is this: he doesn't realize that everything is spirit. He is still tangled up with good and evil, spirit and non-spirit, God and devil. He doesn't see spirit in everything and everything in spirit, so he puts the "Don't tread on the grass" sign where he doesn't see spirit. This won't stop him from pointing you to spirit where he recognizes it. None of us are wise enough to always see God in all his works. It is the spirit that makes us breathe. When we shut ourselves away from the pure breath of life, we close the door to the power that makes us breathe. And when we are too interested in doing indoor work, the spirit finds it hard enough to make us breathe enough to keep us in good condition to grow. Closed rooms and sedentary work frustrate the spirit's will to make us breathe. So working against spirit, we form the habit of breathing too little, depriving ourselves of the life, health, wisdom, power, joy that spirit is trying to give us with every breath. Now we find ourselves hindered by self-imposed habits that need to be broken, so we get to work with the Spirit of life. We open the window and let the Spirit of life in. We go out into the fresh air and rejoice in the Spirit of the sun. We run and jump to make ourselves inhale the Spirit of life. Being too busy to spend hours every day outdoors, we do acrobatics in our camisoles to make ourselves inhale more of the Spirit of life. And always, night and day, winter and summer, we strive to leave our windows wide open so that the Spirit of life does not leave us for a single moment. We are learning to depend totally on Spirit. We used to remember the Spirit only on the Sabbath, Now we remember it every day, and all day and all night we remember to breathe it and eat it as well as think it. And we are truly blessed. Chapter 10. Affirmation and rolling. Mere repetition of affirmations such as "I am success" will do little good. One must think of that which he desires and must put his shoulder to the wheel. But the person who is filled with the sense of failure and defeat is more likely than not to put his shoulder on the wrong side of the wheel. He is so discouraged, worried, and distracted that he thinks that no matter how much he puts his shoulder, the thing won't move anyway. So he foolishly moves forward, working with his shoulder in the same place as always, the wrong place. But let that man make up his mind that there is a way to move that wheel, and he will find it, and you will see things move. That man will circle the wagon once or twice, look at the lay of the land, encourage his horses to be in a good mood, maybe get them to back up a little, say a cheerful "gid ap," and put his shoulder in the right place at the right time, and they'll be on their way. Or another team will pass by just at the right time to give him a boost. The man who believes himself equal to any emergency that arises will be strong mentally and physically. His mind will be alert, full of resources. Instead of pushing like a blind mule at a single point until he falls down exhausted, he will use his wits and find another way. He will conjure up a lever of some kind to move that load. If he can't do it alone, someone else will arrive just in time to give him the boost he needs. He thinks he'll make it somehow, and he does. The man who says, "I'm a failure," will never have anyone arrive just in time. "It's just my bad luck," he laments, and keeps putting his shoulder to the wrong part of the wheel, or pulling desperately and half-heartedly, or with an inner rage that consumes more energy than effort. He keeps going until he has to give up for the time being. Affirming "I am success" will not pull the load out of the mire, except insofar as it awakens energy for intelligent effort. All affirmations and going into silence are helpful in awakening mental and physical energy for intelligent action. All chronic failures are so because they believe in failure and opposition and malicious animal magnetism and generalized negativity. This belief in failure fills the individual with an affinity for undesirable things. The infallible cure, the only cure for failure, is the belief in success, the belief in one's own power to turn even defeat to good advantage. The man who does not know when he is beaten will never be beaten. The dunce who didn't know he was a dunce made it to the top, while the dunce who knew he was a dunce stayed in the dunce class. One of our great hog packers once crossed the continent on foot because he had no money to pay for his trip. After he reached his destination, he said he saw on his walk hundreds of places where he could have started penniless and, in time, accumulated piles of money, opportunities just clamoring to be developed. Only the thought of an even better opportunity down the road kept him from stopping at the first city on his route. But that boy had success in him and was alert to opportunities. He believed in himself and in the world. Failure only believes in bad luck, and his eye is looking for easy jobs, which he is sure he will never have a chance to get. When a man is looking for trouble and defeat, he finds it. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. That does not mean that a man can make some claims of success or profess a new thought and immediately become a success. Man's heart is the emotional center of his habits or instinct, the center from which his instincts, his habits, radiate, as the nerves radiate from the solar plexus. Instincts are thoughts of habit, thoughts of the heart, and each instinct came into existence through conscious thought and effort. Follow your inner experiences as you learn to play the piano, and you will get a clear idea of how instinct arises. At first, your fingers are stiff, and every movement is voluntary. Every movement has to be thought out. But gradually, you get into the habit of handling your fingers in a certain way. Gradually, you stop thinking at all about the movements of your fingers. You do it instinctively. In other words, you have trained your heart, your subconscious mind, to do the thinking for you. From now on, instead of consciously thinking about your finger movements, you think about them in your heart, that is, subconsciously. Psychologists say that no more than 5% of our mental processes are conscious. The remaining 95% is under consciousness. This means that at least 95% of our thoughts are habit thoughts or instinctive thoughts. It is this instinctive part of us, this 95% of us, that is referred to in the Bible as the heart. Now, if this heart of ours carries at least 95% of our mentality, you can easily see why a man is what he thinks in his heart. And you can see why a few successful affirmations, or even many of them, will not change a man enough to make any great difference in his environment. And you can see why a mere intellectual conception of a new thought is not enough to change him and his environment. Man is a magnet. At least 95% of him is habit mind. Therefore, most of his environment comes to him through his affinity with his 95% habit mind or instinct, his subconscious mind, the workings of which are practically unconscious to him. So it is no wonder that he often says, "I don't see why this unwanted thing should come to me." He cannot see why it comes because he is practically unconscious of that great 95% of his thought, which attracts them. He knows that he does not consciously desire these unpleasant things and can scarcely conceive of the fact that he is only conscious of about 5% of his thoughts and desires. And moreover, he is reluctant to recognize that most of himself has no more sense than to attract such things to himself. He is most complacent when he blames the environment, or evil people, or malicious animal magnetism, or a God who punishes the one he loves, or a devil who got loose from God's guiding ropes and goes about angrily annoying good people. Man is a magnet, and every line and dot and detail of his experiences come by his own attraction. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. The preponderance of attraction comes through the instinctive self, the heart, and there is no point in trying to fight or run away from the things that come to us. We only hurt ourselves by fighting, and to run away from the things we have attracted is to run into the arms of similar, or worse, conditions. We have to take ourselves with us. The only way to change conditions effectively is to change the heart, the mind of habit or instinct. This can be done with more or less ease, according to the degree of character established and the degree of will and enthusiasm applied. The key to all change of character lies in that little 5% of conscious mind, which with all its smallness is a sure lever to move the 95% of ponderosity beneath it. For conscious thought is positive, dynamic thought, while subconscious thought is negative, receptive. That little 5% mind has a power of comprehension stronger than several times its volume of subconscious mind, and there is not an atom of all that 95% subconscious mind that cannot be moved by that little 5% mind that lies at the top. The conscious self is the directing power. Just as it directed your fingers to change its fixed habits, so it can direct any change in other lines of mental or bodily habit by directing a persistent and silent practice along the desired lines. Insist on consciously thinking right thoughts, and in due time you cannot but have right subconscious thoughts. Thinking of good, peace, love, self-control, self-reliance, self-confidence, success will long and faithfully fill even the most established heart with habits of good, peace, love, self-control, self-reliance, self-confidence, success. And to the extent that the heart is filled with such habits, the environment and experiences will change to match them. How long will it take to transform you in this way through the renewal of your whole mind? It all depends on you. If your practice is intermittent and half-hearted, it may take another incarnation or two. If you do it with a steady will, eliminating all distractions that weaken your will and enthusiasm, practicing faithfully and diligently, the new habits of mind, you can make the desired change in, say, half a lifetime or less. And if you can bring to your aid high spiritual exaltation and faith, you can make the change in almost no time at all. For spiritual exaltation and faith and enthusiasm will literally melt the hardest heart and enable rapid reformation. This is the secret of rapid achievement in children. Their hearts are clean and melted in the emotional fires of enthusiasm and faith, ready to receive deep and lasting impressions. For the reason that we adults have cooled and even extinguished the heart fires of faith and enthusiasm, so it takes time and repetition to reform ourselves. This is the secret of miracles. Enthusiasm and religious exaltation are similar to the fires of youth. They melt the heart to receive higher impressions. The rationalist must receive his new impressions by meticulous hammering. Repetition and time will do for him what religious or youthful enthusiasm does quickly for children and fools. Affirmations alone will not do the work of putting your shoulder to the wheel when the load has stopped, but they will transform you, heart and conscience, so that you will attract better horses as well as wheels, better roads, more friends to show up in time of need. And affirmations of the right kind will awaken your ingenuity so that you don't overtax your horses or your personal energies to the point of needing a shoulder at the wheel. Success is the natural result of intelligent direction of effort. Affirmations of success, faith, wisdom, power, good, love will awaken your latent forces to more intelligent uses. The more enthusiasm you can conjure up in affirmations, the more quickly you will realize success. Chapter 11. Your strengths and how to manage them. You can exaggerate anything, even self-treatment. If you keep repeating affirmations to yourself, your mental chatter interferes with true healing. It is not the conscious mind that heals you. It is the subconscious or soul mind and the superconscious or oversoul mind. Your soul expression is guided and directed by your conscious mind. A mental affirmation is simply a word of direction to your soul mind. The soul listens to your statements and then builds accordingly. But what if you called your maids and told them over and over again exactly what you wanted them to do and how to do it? If you spent all your time repeating your instructions, when would they finish the job? And wouldn't your instructions get confused too? Of course, you don't do it that way, of course not. Not if you are a wise housewife. You call your maids and tell them quietly and politely and in as few words as possible exactly what you want done. Then they go cheerfully out of your presence and do their best to please you. If later you find something that was not done right, you call a maid and repeat your instructions, perhaps with a slightly more detailed explanation. Then you leave again and trust her to get it right this time. What would happen if you followed your maids and tried to observe, criticize, and direct their every move? Why? They would get nervous and make silly mistakes and you would all give up in despair. And what if you directed them to do a certain difficult job and then came back 5 minutes later, expecting to find it all done? Oh, you can't imagine that you would do such foolish things. You may not do it with your maidservants, but you evidently do it with yourself. Your objective, everyday consciousness is the mistress or master of your being. Psychologists say that objective mental activities are no more than 1/20th of all your mental activities. That means that the mastermind has the equivalent of at least 20 servants under its direction. These handmaids belong to the subjective mind or soul of you. Then there is the great oversoul, of which your individual soul is but an atom whose every demand is heard. That means that your little mastermind not only has at its disposal the equivalent of at least 20 subconscious servants, but it also has at its disposal the equivalent of 10 trillion other helpers of the infinite oversoul. And all the mastermind has to do is say the word. All these helpers fly in to do his will. You may think that all these helpers don't fly to do your will, but they do. The only problem is you, who don't give your helpers time and opportunity to work on your desires. You keep repeating your instructions over and over, and you keep trying to follow your 20 or so maids to see if they are doing the things you want done. You watch them in your stomach, your liver, and your lungs, always worried for fear that they will go wrong. No wonder you get nervous, restless, and tense all over. No wonder your feelings are no better than they were. Do your health, happiness, and success affirmations at regular intervals, say 2 or 3 times a day. Or do them at times when you can't take your mind off your conditions. Make the statements clearly and positively. Then take your mind completely off the subject and give your soul and oversoul a chance to work. Take your feelings lightly and seek to interest yourself in some good work. Take it for granted that your whole being, and all creation besides, is working for you in the things you desire. Rest easy and trust yourself. Do not let your mind label your feelings and symptoms. Give it plenty of useful work and plenty of play and plenty of rest, while your soul works things out for you as fast as it can. Be as interested and happy as you can while the soul is working. Have fun and be happy. Say the word, and then be happy, and don't allow yourself to doubt that the soul will do the work. This is the secret of quick healing. The closer you can be to keeping your mind pleasantly occupied between times when you give yourself special treatments and affirmations, the more quickly you will realize mental, bodily, and environmental health as well as soul health. Your faith in your soul and oversoul will have made you whole. The distrustful mind is a terrible meddler and creator of discord, and the idle mind, the mind that is not directed to useful purposes, is always a distrustful meddler. Moral: take an interest in some good work. Chapter 12. Duty and Love. Even if you work to exhaustion and have no love for your work, it hardly benefits you and your employer less than it should. Duty work deprives the doer of the joy of doing, which is the chief compensation of all work. You imagine that you do your work well out of a sense of duty. You would do it even better if you loved it. If you loved it, you would enjoy every part of it and glory in every little improvement you discovered, and you would discover many because your soul would be playing through your fingers. The soul of the doer by duty is away from his work. He works with his fingers and his mind of habit only. By the end of the week, he is exhausted, and his poor soul withers for lack of exercise. Then perhaps he takes it to church for relief, and carefully shuts it up again before Monday morning. And the worst of it is that so many people make a virtue of keeping their souls shut up 6 days out of 7. They exhibit duty as their primary motivation, and even when they let a little soul, a little love and joy into their work, they don't recognize it. They insist that it is duty that drives them. When the soul manages to come out of its shell and express itself in useful work, the brain denies it the glory and happiness that belong to it. The worker resolutely quenches the vibrations of joy with that stern word, duty. He deprives himself of the pleasure of his honest effort. There are 2 ways to deprive oneself of the joy of work. One is to paralyze joy with duty. The other is to scatter the mind and soul all over creation while the hands are doing something. In the first case, the soul is locked up in idleness. In the second, it is wasted in disordered thoughts. The power of the soul is emotion, that which flows from the silence within. The nature of emotion is movement. Letting emotion flow through the body into intelligent effort is joy and eternally springing life and strength and wisdom. To let the mind wander while the hands work is to waste your soul force at the top of the head. The power that should move from the head down through the body and out into intelligent doing simply dissipates into thin air. The wandering mind robs the body of vitality and joy. It is the prodigal that wastes all your sustenance. The doer by duty is a miser. He lets some of his soul into his work, locking the rest deep inside. He puts his thought into his work, but is stingy with his soul, his love. He works coldly, solidly, conscientiously, constantly reminding himself that he must be good for nothing, as the wise mother commanded the child who wanted a prize for being good. Now everyone knows that cold contracts things. The doer by duty cuts off his soul warmth, and his body becomes thin and pinched. His brain cells rigid, his thoughts angular. He shuts off the inspiration of love and joy and works like a machine, producing the same old things according to the same old pattern. The doer by duty turns a real, living, growing, loving being into a mere cold machine. It is a disgrace. And the whole cause is the old parental tradition that duty is greater than love. I wonder where they got that idea. The same spirit guided them that guides us. That same spirit must have led them and us to do out of duty. Why? To gain self-control so that we may have greater joy. That's it. First, there is the natural, animal way of doing things, just going with the impulse and gratifying yourself regardless of the cost to others. But somehow you're not very happy after you do it. Then there is the mental way of doing things, the should way, when we cut off all the old natural impulses and teach ourselves to work solidly, steadily in the right direction. It requires almost all our thought and effort to control ourselves in this mental way. It requires a firm and unrelenting hand over our impulses. But we were not happy when we did not control our impulses, and at least we are at peace when we do. So we continue to crush the old natural impulses and adhere strictly to duty. When we followed the old animal impulses to have things our way, rightly or wrongly, regardless of the other, we were always tempted by the hope of joy. And when we got what we wanted, as sometimes happened, it was only to be disappointed. So we were filled with restlessness. Since we have chosen the ways of duty, there are no joys to tempt us, but peace accompanies us. In the old way, we were always sure that we were going to be happy. In the way of duty, we have ceased to expect happiness, but we really have peace. And a peace in the heart we have learned from sad experience is worth two joys in the hand. We have been bitten many times, and so we have learned caution. So we continue to educate ourselves to keep peace and close eyes and ears to promises of pleasure. We have learned to follow conscience rather than natural impulse. Conscience is simply spiritual caution. The faculty called caution warns us of external dangers. It was created by many centuries of experience in race by burning fingers and receiving blows on the shins and blows on the head. The conscience warns us of inner dangers, and it is being created by many centuries of human experience by robbing the other, only to find that your own heart is robbed of peace and happiness. We taste impulse and find it sweet at first, and bitter at the end. Then we taste duty and find that its first sharpness melts into a clean sweetness, such as we have never tasted before. A sweetness so pure and satisfying that it is no wonder we continue to cling to the doing out of duty that brought it. When we lived only on uncontrolled and unguided impulses, we were often happy on the surface, when by chance we got the things we asked for, but we were always restless and unsatisfied within. This restlessness is the voice of the universal spirit within, which always urges us to take our mastery over self and direct our energies to higher and still higher uses. It is the voice of life, which always demands a high purpose for being and doing. The spirit of the world that moves us allows each of us a few years and many intervals of irresponsible living. We have our childhood when everyone is smiling and rushing to satisfy every impulse, and when we are good children we have our little vacations and play happily with that sweet taste in our hearts. If we try to take too many moments of play, the spirit within us is frowning and again restless, always urging us to get up and do what will help the spirit of the world to express the beauties it has in mind for us. When we stop chasing pleasure and begin to live and do according to the plan laid out in our hearts, the spirit of the world whispers to us, "Well done." We find peace. We taste and see that it is good. Henceforth we work for inner peace, not for the passing gratification of the outer senses. As we follow duty, peace deepens and broadens. In time we form the habit of duty, and it becomes easier and easier. We do what seems best because we have learned that to do otherwise disturbs our peace, and we have learned to love that peace more than anything else life can offer us. The peace keeps deepening and widening and growing more dynamic. At first it is a solemn calm, and a little deviation from duty disturbs and dissipates it. But in time, as we go on doing our duty, through this solemn calm, ever deepening and widening, comes the full diapason of deep joy. Very gently at first, with many diminutions and silences. At unexpected moments it swells again. Over little things the tide of life has brought us, things we love and thought we had given up forever when we chose duty as our guide. Intermittently at first, deep joy wells up, intermittently and softly, but oh so full and sweet and satisfying, such tones as our souls never heard before. We marveled at the deep joy, and oh we began to see that the spirit of the world was urging us to duty, only that we might find a deeper joy than the former irresponsible life could offer us. By taking mastery over self, by using our energies for higher purposes, we have deepened our capacity for joy. Now the harmony of deep joy begins to swell, and every touch of life only adds hymns of praise, and the good things of life begin to come, houses, lands, fathers, mothers, brothers, 100 times more than ever before, bringing joy as never before. Oh, we thought we had given up the pleasures of life for its duties, and lo, we find the pleasures added. We used to be fascinated and shaken by the pleasures of life. Now we find them fascinated and obedient to us. Oh, the power and glory and joy of it. We gain mastery over ourselves and our environment through doing our duty. We renounce the short-sighted, impulsive will to follow the omniscient will that is working through us. And lo, the things we once vainly desired are now ours to command and enjoy. No wonder we praise duty. But duty is a teacher whose work we need not forever. When we have made its wisdom our own, we outgrow duty. Duty flourishes in love. The more resolution and persistence we put into the doing of duty, the sooner we will overcome it. The more pleasure we can derive from the doing of duty, the sooner we shall overcome it. When the worker puts his soul into his duty, duty is absorbed in love, and joy grows. Many duty workers deprive themselves of the joy that is their due, and hinder the growth of their joy and of themselves, simply by denying that they work out of anything more than a sense of duty. As long as our best actions are called duty, they answer the call as cold, hard duty. As soon as those same activities are called pleasures, our joy, love, and soul turn to them and are transfigured. The worker who calls his work duty encloses his soul away from his body and his work. Your soul is love, and love has no affinity for duty. So as long as you insist on working out of a sense of duty, you shut away from your work, the feeling of love. Thus, you deprive yourself of the joy of doing. And this means that you deprive yourself of most of your power and wisdom to do. Love is the essence of all wisdom, imagination, and inspiration, as well as power. To cling strictly to duty is to shut out love, and with it, the wisdom, inspiration, and imagination needed to improve your work. You deprive yourself of the joy of doing, and your work is deprived of its greatest beauty and usefulness. Stop calling your duties by that name. Have fun doing it for the love of it. Don't you know how you can amuse a child into doing things? Haven't you yourself been amused until at last you laughed and forgave and did what you had resolved not to do? Haven't you seen dozens of your friends being amused into doing things? Of course. All nature responds to a good smiling mood, and your soul, your love, will respond to the same well-meaning good humor. It will come out and smile in your actions and radiate soul glow, joy, power, and inspiration through you and down through your fingers into your work and out into your aura and out into the whole world. Smile and rise higher than the class of duty. The class of joy awaits you. Chapter 13. Well done. The man who possesses an indescribable aversion to becoming a paid employee and prefers to live at the expense of his friends instead of earning an honest living will never succeed even in speculation. Such a man could not generate a desire strong enough to attract fortune even at a gambling table. It takes character to generate a desire of the kind that moves things. It takes firmness of purpose, positive determination, and character, purpose, determination are never found in the parasite. If he had character, he would choose any kind of honest work that would enable him to remain independent. His indescribably aversion to becoming a paid employee would be nothing compared to his distaste for living at the expense of others, even temporarily. Character is the result of unwavering self-respect and self-reliance. A man's character is what distinguishes him from a jellyfish, which takes the form of whatever environment it presents itself. It is something that keeps him standing on his own 2 feet, come what may. Character is the backbony and mental muscly, and is subject to the same laws of development and growth as other bones and muscles. Bones, muscles, and character do not grow by bread alone, but by use. Character grows by the use of self-confidence and self-respect, just as physical character grows by the use of muscles. Character weakens and becomes flabby when self-confidence and self-respect are kept on another man's pantry shelf. Character is developed by exercise. How is he supposed to exercise except by doing things? How is he supposed to do things when someone else is doing them for him? The first thing a man of character, of self-respect and self-reliance would do in such circumstances as MT describes would be to overcome his indescribable aversion to anything that would help him to go on living with self-respect and self-reliance. In fact, the only indescribable aversion a man of true character has is the indescribable aversion to depending on anyone other than himself. A person whose aversion to becoming gainfully employed is greater than his aversion to idleness and living at the expense of others is simply a mass of concession to public opinion. He hates gainful employment because he thinks his neighbors will despise him, and because he likes to appear aristocratic and give orders instead of being what he is and taking whatever orders are necessary for the moment. Such a man cares about appearances above all things. He cares about the outside of things as a jellyfish does. He seeks first a pleasant resting place, as the jellyfish does, and it will sacrifice the last vestige of self-respect, self-confidence, and character for that fetish outward appearance. He thinks it seems better to live at the expense of his friends than to soil his hands to take care of himself. But if he had any real character of his own, if he had a backbone and mental muscles worthy of the name, he simply could not stoop and grovel like a dependent, a beggar. It would have to go out and express itself somehow in some independent activity, or die. For character is a deep life impulse that will push its way to expression through any condition. It simply cannot continue to sit supinely by another man's hearth, or wait by the roadside with hat extended to pick up loose change from passers-by. Character must act or degenerate. Character must express itself or expire. Character is to the individual what the channel is to the river. Remove the banks that confine the stream and direct it, and the water gushes forth in an endlessly muddy swamp. The inner character of a man confines and directs the life force, the force of desire. The stronger the character, the deeper and wider will be the course of desire, or life, and the more positively will the man express himself in independent, self-respecting activity. The stronger the character, the greater will be man's indescribable aversion to depend upon anyone but himself. And so deep and strong are his desires, as they flow through the clearly defined channels of character, that they force new paths through any circumstances. Such a man's desires flow deep and strong enough to carry things in his favor. But the man without a strong character is simply a muddy swamp of sentimentality. He is incapable of anything more than overwhelming desires. His current of desire, having no solid banks, simply overwhelms the whole surface of things, with no depth to work its way through the environment. His desire energy is dispersed and wasted in mere superficial longings, unworthy of the name of desire. So man splashes about in his own swamp of sensibility and gets nowhere. Herein lies the reason why the MT man will not find success at the gaming table or anywhere else except by building little by little a character strong enough to find his way to the good things he desires. The first step toward success is to decide that it is yours, and that all of creation is ready to help you manifest it. The next step is to work with the world, taking whatever job the world gives you, with full confidence that the world will promote you as fast as you demonstrate your aptitude for promotion. Demonstrating your aptitude for promotion involves doing the best you can with whatever job the world gives you, and at the same time, using your spare time and thought to prepare for a better one. Doing one of these things is not enough. The man who does his job exceptionally well will continue to do that same kind of work until the day of reckoning, unless he shows an aptitude for doing a more valuable job. The world is always anxiously looking for men who can fill more difficult jobs. It is always trying to tempt people into higher and better paying positions, and the man who is faithful and efficient in one place and shows the slightest aptitude for more valuable work is always the first to have a chance for promotion. The man who thinks he is repressed is right, but he is repressed by himself alone. Either he is careless, inefficient, uninterested, unwise in his present work, or he is not preparing himself for something better. Abe Lincoln split rails all day long. He split them with vigor and intelligence. But at night he studied books by the light of a pine knot. All the way from splitting rails to the presidency, Abe found time outside of business hours to inform himself on subjects beyond his job. The main difference between Abe Lincoln and Abe Johnson lies in how they spend their after-work hours. Abe Johnson, too, works with vigor and intelligence, and he never had to split rails for a living. He's an excellent accountant. He's been in the same store at about the same salary for 65 years, and almost every noon and every night for 65 years, he has sat on a barrel of sugar in the store and discussed politics and economics, and has very often complained to his friends about his lack of opportunity to move up in the world. Here in a town in Massachusetts, they have been having labor problems for a long time. Cotton mill owners say that the plain cotton fabric business has plummeted, and they simply must cut wages or close down. There is little demand for the type of plain cotton fabrics made in these mills. The mill workers say they can't live with lower wages and they won't, period. So one strike follows another, or a lockout. For months, the factories sit idle while the owners and workers are at a stalemate. Someone suggested that the mills start making the kind of fashionable cotton fabrics for which there is a growing demand. But the weavers refused to learn the new fabrics. They said they knew how to make the plain weave and that they wouldn't get paid to learn the new type of weaving at the old wages, which are paid according to the amount of work done. And many of them said they were too old to make such changes anyway. So these faithful and efficient weavers continue to struggle and strike and curse doom instead of preparing for a new job that would, in the end, pay better than the old one. Poor short-eyed weavers. Poor cousins of the weavers. Poor short-sighted, disappointed Abe Johnson. What do you think life makes us start at the bottom and build little by little for? Solely for the purpose of building character, building good, strong channels for desire to run in. Channels so deep and full that the current of desire is strong enough to achieve for the individual what he wants. And how will we know that we are building the right kind of character? By the sense of inner satisfaction that attests to every action well done. That's where self-respect and self-confidence come in. Even a baby feels his soul's well done when he succeeds in doing something for himself. A child values this inner satisfaction, this self-respect, above all things. Observe the happy expression on a child's face when he has succeeded in doing something for himself. Only foolish adults value anything on earth above this inner satisfaction. Only adults will let other people do for them what they can do for themselves. Only adults will put out their own light for the sake of appearances. To know yourself is to know that the best thing in heaven or on earth, the best guide in heaven or on earth, is the inner sense of well done, the sense of self-respect that comes from doing things rather than letting them be done for you. As long as the inner self approves of your actions, you are building character. And what good will it do if you gain the whole world and lose the well done of your soul? Nothing. Least of all, for in all creation or uncreation, there is only one real satisfaction, one real happiness, and that is self-gratification, self-respect. Self-gratification only arises from doing things well. It is the well done your soul says to you that gives you joy. What does it matter what Thomas and Richard and Harry and Mrs. Grundy say? Be still and listen to yourself. Eye has not seen, nor ear heard the glory and satisfaction that await him who listens to himself. Well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of thy Lord, which is thy inmost self. Chapter 14. What has he achieved? We were talking about the new thinking and the increased efficiency it brings to people. Evidently, he didn't think very highly of the practical aspect of the new thinking. He said it's fine to help people cope with their problems, but it doesn't get rid of the problems. And I said I thought that if it never did more than help people get through things, at least it helps more than anything else that has been done. But I assured him that new thinking properly applied does change conditions, and cited my own experience as proof. I then called his attention to other people prominent in the new thinking, whose conditions and health have improved markedly. One of the names mentioned was that of a successful lawyer known to both of us. Well, he asked, what has he done that is so wonderful? Others have done as great or greater things who have never heard of the new thinking. Of course, the principles of the new thought are the principles of life itself, and in all climes and ages, there have been people who, consciously or unconsciously, lived by the principle and thus manifested health, meaning wholeness, of mind, body, and environment. The ways of wisdom are always ways of placidity, and all its paths are peace. And wisdom is as omnipresent as the ethers, to be used by him who inspires it, by him who desires it above all else. Every pleasant thing and thought in this world comes from the mental breath of wisdom, and every soul that has ever lived has lived breathing wisdom. In proportion to its inspiration of wisdom has been the placidity of its ways and the peace of its path. And his ups and downs have arisen from the fact that he breathes wisdom only at points. Of course, he still breathes mentally, but he does not always breathe wisdom. He is like a man who breathes fresh air in the open air for a time, and then enters a closed room or goes down a mine, and breathes poisonous gases. Just as physical health depends on the amount of pure air breathed in, so physical, mental, and environmental health depends on the amount of pure wisdom breathed in. And no one will deny that most of us breathe in a large proportion of poisonous gas of the mental type, rather than pure wisdom. We breathe on other people's thoughts after them, just as we breathe on the air after them. This thought breathing destroys our physical, mental, and environmental health. We need to come out into God's free air and breathe new thought, or we will suffocate. Old thinking is division, dissension, separation, competition. New thinking is the great opening of principles, unity, harmony, God, good, freedom, peace, love. The new thought is eternal from age to age. Those who inspire it, are the strong and complete, whether they breathe it consciously or unconsciously. By the teachings of the new thought, the world is learning to do consciously and intelligently what a few have done here and there throughout all ages. And do we need to be reminded of the advantages of knowing how and why we do things? What has he done that is so wonderful? The lawyer we are talking about is not what the world calls great in any line. He has not built a Standard Oil system, nor has he brought it down. He is not a Roosevelt or a Togo or a Napoleon or even an Elbert Hubbard. His desires and ambitions have run on other lines. He is not built that way. He doesn't have it in him to be a Rockefeller, and he's content with that. So why should he compare himself to Napoleon or Rockefeller? Do we measure roses and violets and daffodils and chrysanthemums by the same standards? Is the violet inconsequential because it spills its sweetness into a shady corner instead of spewing it at high noon from the top of a sunflower stalk? No. We measure violets with other violets, not with sunflowers or hollyhocks or peonies. And men are more diverse than flowers. Each man has his own individuality, his own soul specifications to develop. Each man comes as the flower of a peculiar ancestry, like no other ancestry of man. To judge one man by another is as foolish as to judge a violet by a sunflower. This lawyer of whom we speak is in a class by himself. He has not achieved what Rockefeller has, but he has achieved something that satisfies him more than the stock of a dozen Standard Oil magnates could ever do. And what is success if not personal satisfaction? To succeed is to accomplish what one sets out to do. Growing success is a matter of growing ideals and a succession of successes. Our attorney is pleased with the new thinking and its effectiveness in his case. Through its use, he has accomplished a succession of things he wanted to do. He has literally rebuilt himself and his environment as well, and he has developed new ideals and developed new energies that show him a joy-filled eternity ahead. He is satisfied with the new thinking as a working principle. He continues to work with it, growing daily in wisdom and knowledge, growing daily in greater graces of character, mind, body, and environment. It is the man who does not live the teachings of the new thought who judges them by the outward appearances of other men's lives. Chapter 15. Will and Wills. In a copy of an old magazine there is an article entitled, "What New Thought Women Say About the Will," by an old thought woman, who does not sign her name. This article is as confusing as anything I have read recently. It amuses me. And yet it touches a sensitive chord of stored memories, and I sympathize. That is, it enables me for the moment to re-enter the same pathia or condition this woman describes. Every step she has taken, I have experienced as well. But I have gone through it all and emerged into the higher spiral, where I am able to understand the phenomena of wills in relation to each other and in relation to the whole. In a nutshell, the idea of old thought woman is, the will is part of that illusory mortal mind. It is the executor of the world, the flesh, and the devil. The will of God is a fiction. Devil, with a capital letter, mind you. She then goes on to tell how willful she used to be. She dominated her relatives, friends, and enemies alike, and even cats and dogs. There was almost no way in which the will could dominate that I would not work to its limits, she says. I intended to marry without declaring my opinions, to obtain property and support, but to refuse all sensuality because she was adamant against procreation. Decidedly an unpleasant person, I would say. No wonder she was cordially hated by those whom she mesmerized and mocked. No wonder pain, anguish, hatred, suffering, disappointment followed in the wake of every triumph. no surprise. Then he tired of it all and renounced all will. In a complete loss of will, self-will, God's will, every kind of will, there is a miraculous condition of affairs, she says. She then goes on to preach Christ's teaching of non-resistance. Every positive character, and probably every negative character as well, goes through an experience identical to this woman's at some point. The more pronounced the character, the more definite the change from self-will to self-denial. A negative character will eternally cling to his self-will, and the abandonment of his will cause him all the anguish that this woman experienced as a result of using his will. Now, without pointing out the errors of this writer, let me give my statement of the will, its nature and uses, after which I think you will see that the old thought woman's understanding needs to grow a little. Will is the motive, electrical force of the universe, the only force there is. Will is the energy that forms worlds and spins them in space, that dissolves all forms and creates a new. Will is attraction and gravitation. Will is love, and will is hate. Will is the passion, the active force of the One. Will is omnipresent and omnipotent. Without will there could only be stagnation, death, annihilation. But there is the will, and there are wills. There is an all-pervading, all-evolving will, and there are innumerable little wills plunging and struggling. There is a great ocean, and there are innumerable little tossing waves, each bent on its own goals to rise above its neighbors. On the unseen side, the will is one, the only one. On the seen side, there are only wills, beginning and ending within the personal circle. Will is the executive of omniscience. Will is the executive of universal wisdom, constantly evolving. The will of God is not a fiction. It is the one and only and immutable pact against which personal wills incessantly and futilely throw themselves, to their undoing and the increase of knowledge. All wisdom and all will are the great ocean, out of which personal wisdoms and wills are thrown, and to which they all return. Will and wisdom are all there is in the universe. They are one and inseparable. Water is correctly formulated as H2O, and every atom in the universe, seen or unseen, is simply will in definite and varying proportion to wisdom. The less wisdom in the mixture, the more foolishly the will be exercised. Will is commonly used as a name for the will exercised by the 5% conscious mind. The individual reasons from his own narrow view and establishes his will to execute his finite judgments. For the moment, he establishes his judgment as infallible, grits his teeth, clenches his fists, and moves forward, until he comes face to face with the universal will. It is as if one of your hands establishes a judgment of its own and tries to force the other hand to move according to its pattern. Your right hand sees and judges for a right hand, but not for a left hand. So also with this old thought woman. She established her judgment and tried to subdue relatives, friends, enemies, animals. Subjected to what? To her will? No. subjected to her judgments. Her will was simply the executive, the sheriff's posse. Having a strong will, he had his way in many cases, where a less determined individual would have held equally severe judgments without having the will to execute them. Was his evil will an illusion? No. But her wisdom was a deficit, a personal quantity, and therefore her will was